Alright, everybody, welcome to episode 5 of the Game Clinic presented by the Noob Stream. So, Game Clinic is I'll be working with a player looking at a game of theirs and how they played their hero, talking about their thoughts on the game as well as the hero itself. So, I hope everyone can enjoy the experience and learn something about the game out of it. With me here again today is Lee, who's been a great guest throughout the series. This is the Jakiro that we're going to be doing today. Welcome, Lee. How you doing?
Good.
Alright, so we're at 32 seconds. I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So Lee is a 5-position player. He usually gets wards and courier for his team, so hugely helpful. Always great to have one of these on your team. So what are you thinking about as a Jakiro player, as we see you headed to your usual ward spot that covers
I've been watching Universe Jakiro, and I've been hearing from friends that Jakiro is really strong. So I probably have played, I want to guess, maybe 20 games in my life of Jakiro. And this is kind of my new support that I'm learning. So I think the thing that I know is maxing liquid fire and just going through towers. That's kind of the gist of Jakiro.
Okay, so as we see you placing a lane ward here, can you walk us through your thoughts on when you place that ward in the lane and when you place it over here closer to the rune?
So usually, if I place it in the lane, I want to be more aggressive, and I want to see if there's anyone coming into the lane. Sometimes I'll place this lane ward like later in the game because I want to see who TP's in at this tower. Mm-hmm. I would say majority of the lane wards that I place at 0 minutes is the one overlooking the rune and has vision into our jungle. I just like that one. Yeah.
Okay, so a word on that as well. One other incentive you have if you're making a decision between placing the lane ward or the ward overlooking the rune is actually how many heroes are in that off lane for the Dire. If there's only one hero and you're doing a good job of zoning him out, he may not even feel safe checking the rune when it's time to do so. So in this case, you want even more vision in the lane to see if anybody's responding or coming to help, or if there's an opportunity to kill him, versus the rune ward. It's not as important for you to put a ward there because you can just go check it yourself more safely than the other guy can. So that's a factor to consider. So Jakiro is kind of a weird hero. His spells are all kind of skill shots, and they have relatively slow casting times. Slow to the extent that you have to worry about heroes like Clockwork with Battery Assault can actually prevent you from casting some of your spells because of the delay. And because of that, he's got more skill shot, more skill with anticipation of when to cast your spells, or a setup. So the setup, obviously, is what you mentioned, Universe, and a lot of Jakiro players, they get a Yule Scepter, so they can put someone in the air and then lay down the Ice Path and the Macropyre on them. So, yeah, hitting your spells, or as you saw with that First Blood, waiting for someone to set you up so that you can hit your spell easily helps you become a more effective Jakiro player. And then, of course, what you mentioned is the skill that most people max on Jakiro is Liquid Fire.
Yeah, so I think at any opportunity I can get, I'm trying to liquid fire the Undying or the tower. So anytime it's off cooldown, I'm trying to use it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and Liquid Fire spreads to things around it. It does damage to the tower, and it slows its attack speed tremendously. So it makes Jakiro odd in that he has this skill that has tremendous harassment and offensive potential in Liquid Fire that doesn't cost mana. And you can auto-cast it, but ideally you want to turn it off auto-cast and cast it obviously when you need it. So I like that you're not using the auto-cast here. And
I think it gives a longer range if you don't auto-cast, right?
I'm actually not sure about that. That would be something that
I think that's true.
From it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Maybe. Don't quote me on that.
So you mean it functions like an orb, kind of? There's like a...
Yes, I believe it is.
It is an orb. It says unique attack modifier. Okay, so that's great. I just learned something from you. one of many things that I'm expecting to be able to learn from you. And that's part of the whole point of this cast. So, yeah, the liquid fire, if you micromanage its use, it becomes even more effective. And it's just a huge annoyance to heroes. And I've even seen situations where you don't get off an attack, or like people are used to canceling their attack animations, but if you slow their attack with liquid fire, they might cancel their animation too early and not even get off the attack. I know this because this happened to me yesterday. So, yeah, Jakiro is just a hugely annoying and versatile support. Some of the weaknesses of the hero, as with other, I'd say, relatively defensive supports, he doesn't usually make a great ganker or roamer unless you have a good partner with him, just because his spells are hard to hit, and they also don't do a ton of burst damage per se. It's more about control and like AoE and wearing things down than bursting them. So yeah, Jakiro makes a great defensive support. What are you thinking in terms of items and progression for this game?
Yule's, I think Yule's, what else? Yule's mech, maybe. Typical support items I'm always at least considering getting, like mech and pipe, urn, force staff. Those are pretty typical things I think about. I don't know what exactly is the best besides Yule's. Like, I think Universe sometimes gets a blink dagger, maybe, if I'm correct, or a force staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the blink is more of a tempo thing. I did talk with Lee before about this, but sometimes you have to account for the circumstances in which you're playing. So blink is used more at the pro level because people are keenly aware of the Yule's potential on Jakiro, so they're more careful not to ever be in vision or have answers for it. So the blink helps him basically as tempo be able to surprise the opponent and get in position sooner for it or from anywhere. Whereas the blink may not be as necessary in some pub games because people aren't as keenly aware of what the Jakiro is capable of doing, or the follow-up isn't as sharp. People don't just instantly die if they get caught in your combo. But mobility item is nice, and I think mobility would be additionally useful in this game. Obviously you get the move speed from the Yules, but if you got Force Staff or something as well, because they're a team that wants to bog you down and fight you in place. They want you to fight in the tombstone and get slowed by it. They want Axe's Call so he can ult. They want you to be slowed or frozen so that Skywrath can blow up on you, or the CM ult. So this game is a situation where mobility items, when you're looking for utility choices on a support, that's certainly a direction that you can go this game because it'll help you a lot against their lineup.
So one thing that I know I was not happy with this game was the lane equilibrium was pretty bad. Like I think several times I tried to double pull, but our jungler ruined the double pull. So you'll see like a lot of times the creep wave is all the way at the tower, and I think we could have controlled this so much better, but we didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Undying.
That's one thing that you can't really do so much about, but you can communicate, is if you have 2 or 3 people in the lane against a solo laner, you should be able to keep the creep wave really far from them. And sometimes this means you have to tank the creep wave before your tower starts firing on it in this area to keep the creeps there. And that's one of the things about liquid fire as well. If you do get a cast of it and happens to collateral the creeps, then it'll help you push perhaps the unintended consequence. But yeah, lane management's pretty important. It makes a big difference in making sure that their offlaner doesn't get more than he needs to, or more than he deserves. Another thing I want to point out, this phenomenon happens a lot in pub games, especially, all pub games, ranked games too, is when you're the solo support. So Lee likes to play 5 position, that's his usual forte, but being a solo support can mean a lot of pressure on yourself. As you see, they're practically invading your jungle non-stop. This is going to be the second time that Axe has come to get a kill on you. Because you don't have a second roaming partner, you don't have someone else who's usually ready to TP around. This is something that's really usually annoying and counterproductive, is having a greedy second jungler who can't do anything without his ultimate or without certain items, so he can't contribute at all to support burdens. And as you can see here, the effects of this are being felt on your safe lane because the LC can't really come and fight them off, and they have aggressive wards up on your side of the map. and they're basically just swarming to this bottom tower. It looks like Axe wants to cut the creeps to take it away. So, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts in response to
So
that?
one thing here, actually, I panic and bought out too many TPs, and I know I always try to buy out before I die, but sometimes like I don't have boots yet, and this is to me pretty problematic. And yeah, obviously they're going on us right now. So
Yeah, and just a word. I do believe that liquid fire burn spreads to zombies, so that's not really a counter, but it can help mitigate them or even save your allies from them.
Tower is under attack.
and you'll see like this ward that I place is actually I place it fairly often because I feel like the enemy often sieges this bottom safe lane tower, and that ward is I feel like it's been useful a lot of times. I don't know if this is a particularly common ward when you're trying to defend your safe lane bottom, but I just find myself placing this ward a lot when we're trying to defend bottom.
So, it obviously is valuable for spotting out anybody coming from the side of their tower, but I think in this case, in this game, given how the rotations have gone, you might want to opt for a ward closer to your jungle camps covering that angle. There are a couple reasons for that. One is you guys have a decent lineup for sitting at your tower where you're not as worried if somebody's like standing there, like there's no Pudge or Mirana or somebody that can suddenly surprise you. The other reason that they do have an Axe, so what the Axe is going to be doing if they want to push bottom, he's either going to be walking down to cut the creeps, or if he's got downtime before his allies get there, he's going to be looking to farm your camps. So either way, I think if you put a ward near the magic bush area to see who's coming up through the river, that might have profited your team a bit more.
Yeah.
You did get up a second ward here at some point, overlooking the river itself. So I think that's pretty good coverage. So you guys look to be weathering the storm here. Their Axe is off to a really good start, and your lane has kind of collapsed, but you're hanging in there. You've only died twice, and you've participated in some of the early action. So I think you're making the most out of a bad situation, and you guys haven't really gotten a chance to offensively use liquid fire. There is one thing I would point out here: the wards are good, and obviously your team needs them. But is that your boots finally?
Yeah, that's my boots finally.
Yeah. Well, you did have some clarities that might have allowed you to get your boots sooner. I'm not sure if you're maxing liquid fire if you're gonna need clarities as much because your spells are gonna come in very rare situations when you're going for a kill.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the boots would have saved you in those initial fights, but it might have made things more difficult for them. And I mean, that's just another part of the struggle. If you're getting all the support stuff, you have to make a decision when to get your boots and like when to, and I think generally you can skimp a little bit just to make sure that you get those boots out, because also if you're too slow, I mean, even if you have vision, it's hard for you to respond to the things that you can see if you're too slow or too weak to really do anything.
I probably should have liquid fire to help my carry clear that way.
Yeah, and I think you're making the right call here, which it looks like. I don't think you guys are defending this tower, right? It seems to be.
I think I just backed out.
So that's actually when that ward paid off, because it allowed you to see, or you might have already seen that Axe had a blink, and it allows you to see if he's waiting there trying to blink in on your tower. So there's a situation where that ward paid off pretty well. Unfortunately, the only vision that it gave you was that you guys couldn't defend that tower, but that's still important. It prevents you from sinking more resources into something that you can't really defend. So your team's in a pretty tough position. What are you thinking at this point, or are you don't communicate except with pings? But if you could talk to your allies, what would you be saying?
Probably that we could use the tower soon. I mean, like as a Jakiro, I kind of expect to get a tower pretty early, but we haven't had one yet, and we're down. I guess we're only down one tower, but it's not going to what I expected. Yeah, game isn't going.
Okay. I would probably say at this point,
Come and get it.
I think as a support, well, at least at the pro level, but obviously these aren't pro level games, as you, nice TP there, narrowly survived. Is telling your team what to expect from or like what you should be fighting or doing. I think what's happening here, although you guys got a decent amount out of this exchange, is that you see that the Tiny has a blink. That's like a fighting build. Like that tells you that he wants to gank. Axe obviously has a blink, and their team is extremely strong right now. Like they have the perfect balance of having the burst damage from their Tiny and Skywrath, and Undying being at his best because he's got the right balance of items and effectiveness on his Tombstone and Decay. Well, I think what I would be saying right now as support, if you did communicate with your team, is lay out some expectations. Like, guys, we need to play D. We can't be picking all of these fights. Like, they're really strong right now. And I think that's probably the most you could do as a support at this point. Just like try to assess the game situation and tell your team what they can do to not, to minimize their disadvantages.
Hmm. So one thing that I'm not sure of is I think I tend to use my my ults, my macro pyre pretty liberally in clearing out waves, and so this is one thing that maybe I'll play more and get a better feel of when I can use it in a team fight, when I need to save it in a team fight, and when I can just use it to clear a wave.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a pretty short cooldown. 60 seconds is good. I would say that, you can use it when your waves are pushed, or if you're just trying to farm like a far away wave, and obviously like you want it to be up in team fights ideally, but in this game I'd probably tend to hold on to it a bit more and try to use Liquid Fire to farm, because they very clearly are like forming, be aggressive and like group together. So the situations where you want to have it up are going to exceed the ones where you could have said, well, I could have farmed with it instead.
Mm-hmm.
This is also, like, some games are better than others in terms of the setup spells that you have, and, like, as we just saw, the Magnus is a pretty good setup for your AoE abilities. So sometimes you kind of want to follow his cue, or wait for him to do his thing first, or wait to see how they react to him before you lay down your spells. Also, just like small details that you might be able to work on, like if you know that they have blinkers, you could try to obviously Liquid Fire them without exposing yourself, because that's a huge annoyance to them and it might disrupt their timing in these fights.
Radiant's top tower is under attack.
So you guys are holding the fort pretty well. It looks like you're putting their aggression back against them, and it looks like you do have a Midas on the Slark. So I would say that you guys ended up losing this game, but I'd say that you guys are in pretty good position. So yeah, I'm kind of curious as to how this game develops. So for these series of support games, I have found a continuing trend. I've been ending the episodes a bit early because, once you've seen the mechanics or learn how to play the hero, a lot of times the game's kind of out of your hands. So do you have any, can you share with us some of your thoughts on playing support, or, you said you wanted to try some other roles?
Yeah, so support was kind of the role I was introduced to by another player who plays a pretty high level support. And I've experimented a little bit with offlaning, some hero solo offlaning, a little bit of carry, but I've always gone back to support just because it felt comfortable. But I definitely have learned a lot of other things that I would not have had I continued just playing support only. Like, there are a lot of different tricks, like laning aggro tricks when you're, for example, I don't know, you might be able to explain this better, like that there's a aggro trick where you're like within 500 range of an enemy creep, and if you A-click the enemy hero, you can have the aggro check you, and then you can enter kind of that range and harass for free. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So I think this was covered in actually a mid lane guide.
Okay.
They were looking at how the heroes were managing aggro. So if you, I believe this is what you're talking about, but if you leash aggro from the creeps by attacking an enemy, and then it won't re-aggro again within a few seconds. I think it's like 3 to 5 seconds. Yeah, okay. 2 seconds, you said?
Yeah, I think it's 2 seconds.
Okay, so what you could do is, especially if you're on a ranged hero, is you can attack and it'll pull the creep aggro, but then you get out of there or back away from that range so that it can't attack you and goes back to fighting, and then you can get off free harassment after that. So that's a trick that, I mean, it's great that you learned it as support. I would argue it's more of a part of the mid lane tool set, just because it's so important to creep position and stuff there.
I think the reason why I think it's useful as a support is you can harass for free. You can harass without taking any damage from the enemy creeps. So I think the way to do it is your 500 range out of the nearest enemy creep. You 8-click the enemy hero. You right-click near, like you move closer to the enemy hero, and if you attack the enemy hero within 2 seconds of 8-clicking him originally, you can get a free right-click on him without taking any damage from the enemy creep. I think that's how it works.
Alright, so that's obviously hugely valuable in terms of what you talked about earlier with managing creep equilibrium, and like obviously if you pull creep aggro while you're harassing, your creeps are going to get an advantage because they're going to be attacking the enemy creeps while they're not retaliating, so that's going to cause the lane to push. So when you want to harass optimally, you're taking as little damage as possible. Like you're trading HP basically blow for blow if the enemy hits you back, or not at all. So that's optimal harassment. You want to be trading HP as effectively as possible, and you want to keep the creep equilibrium in a place that's friendly to your team. And yeah, that's one of those things that you really need to pay attention to detail or read that mechanic somewhere to know how that works. So thank you for sharing that. You enlightened me a bit on that as well.
Because I know one of the common complaints of supports is they say, "Oh, I harass the enemy, carry, but I take so much damage." And you need to, I guess, figure out how to harass, but not, take so much damage that's not worth harassing.
Right, and a lot of that is also lane position, and like where you're harassing from. If you usually just run past somebody, as he mentioned, it's worse than if you're, say, at the side of the creeps, so that you're far enough away that you're outside of the aggro range. The creeps don't really respond to your harassment. So yeah, positioning is very important early on in support. Whether you win or lose a lane, or whether the off lane gets what they want, can hinge very much on just how you position yourself, or even like an early creep wave or two can make a pretty big difference before the offlaners get strong enough to survive your harassment.
So like right now, I see that the enemy's on the bottom, and I use my macro pyre to clear this wave, just because I want to put pressure on the mid tower, I guess.
Yeah, I like this decision here, because you very astutely gauged that they were bottom and you decided to put pressure on the tower. I think it's one of those situations where you kind of want to trade. You're looking to trade because you feel that, well, maybe we're gonna have a hard time fighting them right now or defending our tower, so I want to get something in return. So ultimately they TP'd very quickly, and there's not much you could have done to do that except either have your team keep vision on them or have a ward overlooking the tower.
So I think that actually if I bought back here, it might have been worth it. I don't know your opinion. I think I could possibly have changed the fight if I bought back.
But you don't have the gold to, so...
Oh, I did before.
Oh, you did? Okay. You bought out?
I think I just bought out, yeah. But I think I could have made a difference, yeah.
Well, the only thing I'm looking at kind of now is that you could have denied the tower, but in terms of... I'm not sure if you could turn that fight there. A couple of reasons. One is you're looking at the big cooldowns, right? So you don't have the reverse polarity either way. And like your Magnus was dead. I believe your Legion was dead as well. So the Slark alone with just you is probably not going to be able to significantly turn the tide or kill them when you don't have any real setup to keep them in place, and they're pretty tanky and don't deal that much damage unless they're kept in place. So that's kind of a judgment call. I do wish that you had denied the tower. It's just like a very small thing. Like earlier, there's another game where you didn't deny the tower when it was like down to 8 HP. So that's just a minor technical thing that you'll pay more attention to over time, I'm sure.
This'll come in handy.
Well, what you could do instead, you talked about clearing the waves, is instead of using your ultimate, I mean, you got a pretty good amount of damage from your dual breath. So, since you're not putting any more points in your ice path, you could just use that instead without blowing a massive cooldown on it. It's also interesting that you didn't level ice path. Can you talk about, is that the decision that you usually make, or was it like a situational thing?
So I'm still playing around with it, so I don't know. Maybe this might be a wrong decision, but I guess the idea of value point and like maxing out the other spells, like I don't know how to call this. Like the way of playing a hero is optimally usually is to like max out, you know, 1 or 2 spells and then put that value point in that other spell, or not, or even skip that, you know, third spell. Just as a general rule of thumb. I don't know what to call this exactly. You know what I mean?
Like you're buffing the spells that you want, and there's like, I can't think of a specific word for it either, but it's almost like specialization kind of.
Kind of. Like if you have like 1 point or 2 points in each, like sure it's okay, you know, but if you really max out 2 of them and then just put a value point in one of them or not put any points in that third one, then it might be better use of it. I don't know what to call it. Better.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, yeah.
More value. I don't know what you want to call that.
Right. As you guys take a nice team fight down here. I think this game, I would have opted to choose the ice path as the skill to value, and the reason for that is just the general dearth of disable on your team. I mean, your only real disable is Magnus, so you're pretty much counting on him to not get initiated on and to be the one doing the initiating. You have a ton of damage coming from like Sark and Timbersaw, but I would say that, you know, having a full ice path doesn't scale great. The damage doesn't change. Nothing else about it changes except the duration. But I think having an extra like almost 1.5 seconds on your ice path would be pretty valuable for your team instead of the damage from dual breath. So that's kind of a stylistic and situational choice, but I think I would have gone with ice path in this case.
Dyer's top tower is
A lot of it just depends on really what your team needs or what your team has a lack of, and I think this game it's kind of disable. Alright, so you're getting close to your Yules here. It looks like you guys have more or less stemmed the tide, although the other team... So you've done a pretty good job, I think, of... They wanted to go a really aggressive build, and they wanted to fight you, but you guys have defended your tier 2 towers pretty well, and you guys have had generally good positioning in fights while they go chasing. So you're about to complete your Yules. What are you thinking about after you finish that in terms of items or anything else?
I mean, I'm not sure about items. I'm still not sure exactly what items to get on Jakiro besides Yules. I don't remember what I get. Maybe I get Mechanism on him next, but I think right now I'm probably thinking about which tier 2 we're going to try to take next. I'm not sure about what I'm thinking about in terms of items.
Okay, and are you amenable to a trade, or are you thinking, you know, we want to defend and stuff?
I mean, right now we're not in the best position to defend this bottom, and my personal opinion is this tier 2 is the worst in terms of defending on the region, and so I
Bottom tower is under attack.
I'm not sure I would defend necessarily.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah,
So
I don't know.
I totally agree with you on that, and you brought up a great point with this tier 2, and I would say the dire tier 2 in the same lane. And I mean, tier 2s in general, other than the mid one, they're hard to defend because usually the defending team has to go uphill, so you're kind of like fighting uphill into them, and if they get good position on you, it's just like, it's really hard to defend. It's usually better to get trades out of it, so I'm glad that you kind of made that point for me, and some of the towers are just naturally harder to defend than others, and you know, if you need to be getting something of value at all times, so if you're not able to defend something or pick up kills, then you need to get a tower or something in return. This macro pyre, you could probably do without, but I'm sure you knew that already.
I think also I think I was not very happy with the Legion commander in this game.
Okay.
Yeah, I just remember this game being like I was not happy with the Legion commander. I'm not sure if that's a valid thing to say, but yeah.
Well, there've been a lot of team fights. He's not even getting to this one. He doesn't have a TP. He's got 24 duel damage, so he's won 2 duels in 30 minutes of a pretty active game. Yeah, I think that would be grounds for displeasure. So his item choice, most Legion commanders go Blink just because obviously you can go in and duel instantly. He's got a Shadow Blade, and I mean, I see some people get this because it just helps his damage and stuff naturally. It's also a sneaky way of getting off initiations, but I don't like that item him as much as a Blink. I mean, if you're super rich, you could probably justify it. But, you know, here's the thing about, as I mentioned, like when someone picks a greedy jungler instead of a second support or a more active jungler, you can kind of expect that out of those guys, right? Like they're just going to get a greedy item to farm with, or something that, you know, they want that doesn't really help the team as much.
So actually, we missed something where I TP'd out of the team fight, and both my players that I left behind died. I didn't really get a good look of it, but that also might have been a mistake to TP out.
Yeah, generally as a support, I mean, you want to be dying for higher value targets, but that also could have been a reflection of your build. I mean, if you did stop to try to stop them from killing your allies, it's not a huge difference, but your spells right now are more oriented towards damage and slowing their attack, and a lot of their damage is coming from nuke rather than right click, and like without a long disable, you might have just ended up dying yourself. So I missed the situation in question, as you said, but yeah, that kind of also determines what impact you can have.
Things like like when I'm supporting and I like put wards in the places I put in this game, like right now, I'm also a little bit like, I feel like if I communicated via mic, it would have been better. Okay, I'm trying to check Roche, but I get caught out.
Yeah, this is actually... This is kind of an example of what I was talking about in the previous game and earlier in this game. So, I like the ward up here in the choke point leading into your forest, but given how active their team is and how they've generally been kind of staking out and living in your jungle, I'm not sure that I would try to ward that spot or contest it, because it's like you're almost guaranteed to run into resistance from them. Like they're almost guaranteed to either kill you or force a fight there. So it becomes something where, like, if I'm aware that they have a ward there, I'll be like, okay, they have a ward there, we can play accordingly, instead of like we should fight for it or contest it, just because I feel like that place is so hard to hold for your team in the current state of the game.
Yeah, and one like small detail that I feel like, so usually when you think that they warded someplace and you have your observer and sentry wards, to me like the best steps is to first put down the sentry to see, where, if they have an observer or a sentry, and you can deward it, and then put down your observer, so they don't know where your observer is. Do you kind of get what I mean?
Yeah, so that's kind of that's like one of those like sneaky support tricks that you're talking about. Well, first of all, if you put down the sentry, you can see like even if they even have a ward or not, sometimes outright without the observer.
Yes.
So obviously that's value, and then you can still decide whether, as you mentioned, you want to put the observer there. Sometimes you don't want to put the observer there; you just want to deny them vision, and yeah, you just don't want them to know about it so they can contest it. So that's an extension of what you were talking about. What we were talking about what they know about the wards.
So you saw actually being greedy when I was trying to put ward the bottom rune spot. You saw me being greedy. I put down the sentry ward, and then I try to go on high ground to see if if they have a sentry and an observer, so that I can hide my observer placement. But then I get caught out because I first put down my sentry, and I didn't put down that observer ward first. If I put down that observer ward first, I would have at least had vision of that area. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So I mean, there was just like a brief order in what in a sequence that you already usually prefer, and that ended up being costly. Yeah, I think just my point with that is just that I probably wouldn't have tried to contest vision there because it's like an area that you can't really hold. Like you're still kind of in a position. I feel your team is like you still want them to throw under your towers ideally instead of taking the fight to them.
Mega kill. Double kill.
Yeah, here if I maybe had stuck with my team in mid, then maybe it would have been a little bit better.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of hindsighting, but if that ward that you had gone on this hill right by your ancients, I think that could have helped forestall that, or that's something where it's a little bit riskier for them to deward, or like you have more information to make a decision and like protect your own team from them.
I think the kind of going back to that bottom rune ward was checking Roche and how I can check Roche safely, I guess, with this team, with my particular support. Because I feel like we have no control over Roche at all.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think since there are no like clear, easy ways, like you don't have any summons or anything, I actually think that your best way of checking Roche, if you're gonna do it at all, is probably to send the Stark. Convince him to do it, or you have to. We talked about like making concessions, or you might have to just concede Roche, because you're so dependent in these fights on your Magnetor that if you go in areas where you don't have vision or where you're not sure where they are, and your Magnus gets picked off, you're almost guaranteed to lose the fight if your Magnus gets picked off, because you don't have anyone near the control that they do, and you have a lot of AOE damage that's not reliable unless you get like a good RP off. So I almost feel like in this case you're okay conceding Roche because you can't afford to be like right on the spot when they're going for it, or you can't afford to have vision on that side of the map to watch over them. So yeah, that's a tough decision to make. Roche is a lot to concede, but on the other hand, they also haven't taken it. I don't think Roche has died a single time yet, so they don't seem to be prioritizing it, and it's just a lot higher cost for you to try to establish map control over there.
Mm-hmm. I think the teamwork in this game was particularly poor.
Yeah, it looks like both in terms of itemization and it looks like you guys aren't on the same page as much as they are. Like they're just pretty much 5-manning like everywhere.
Yeah.
And you guys have like people farming sporadically. Nobody's trying to cheat. They're just smoked here and they're coming through your woods again. Looks like they're gonna pick up some more kills. And it looks like they just kept snowballing off of that. Like this is something that's hard to do in pub games, and it's a point of frustration with strangers, which is when people place too much of a priority on getting like a few hundred gold here and there versus playing together with the team or taking advantage of their opportunities. Like you guys are on the defensive, so in order for that to work, you need both defensive vision to keep your towers from just collapsing to this tiny and stuff, and also to like be nearby to help each other out. The fights that you've had success with in this game have actually been ones where they dive and you have allies nearby to like punish them for it. Like every team fight that you've won has basically been a result of that. But the rest of the time, everybody's just kind of doing their own thing. Their team hasn't been like within less than the screen of each other for a long time, unless it's to accomplish something very short term. And here you see the first Roche of the game. Yeah, that's something it's just a challenge for all of us playing pub games. you can try to communicate it. Sometimes it doesn't work, and people just start flaming and getting frustrated. And but as I mentioned here, I think there's about to be another beatdown over here.
Yeah.
It's just a part of the map that you cannot hold, especially if everyone's disjointed. And it looks like
I'm burning up.
there's a pretty good RP from the Magnus, but it's not enough because there's some people retreating, some people are like coming in, some people aren't there.
Yeah. Like, I just used my ult on bottom lane creeps.
Yeah, yeah, and you weren't like you weren't close enough to the fight, and you had no reason to be close to the fight because, but when the fight first broke out, it was like unwinnable, and it was clearly like a retreat situation. So it's like, why would you even go closer to the fight? And it ended up being something that maybe you could help out with, but you were ultimately still going to lose.
Yeah.
So this is a really frustrating class of game.
Dyer's top tower is under attack.
I put it in like, you know, sports terms, but it's just like getting more people to the point of attack. And like if one team pronouncedly gets more people to the point of attack, and the other team doesn't have a hero that's like a huge game breaker on his own, then you're gonna very slowly be squeezed out and lose the game.
So kind of my expectation, like when a team like 5-mans like this, I kind of expect some of my carries to farm other lanes, and even though we might give up a tower, like my carries have pushed other lanes to put pressure elsewhere and have farmed, so that there's that farming advantage that we have, even though we lost the towers. Because they have
absolutely.
No, we've got our carries farm elsewhere on the map. But
Yeah.
I guess in this case it wasn't enough. I don't know. I don't really keep super duper close tabs on like the levels of my teammates, but like I would have maybe expected the Slark to have gotten some solo ganks, maybe, you know, earlier in the game, or you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, because you did ensure him a good
This'll
start.
come in handy.
So, and there are a lot of heroes that he can pick off by himself. I mean, the CM and Skywrath should basically be food for the Slark. Other thing you mentioned is like where everybody's off farming if they're not together. I mean, a lot of times they're just farming ancients for the jungle, but they're not pushing out lanes or putting pressure, or like pushing out lane often just reveals where the enemy is, right? Because they're going to try to defend their towers, or someone's going to defend their towers, and that creates openings elsewhere. Especially when you have a hero like Slark. I mean, he's so fast that you can go up, they have to send 2 heroes to realistically stop him, otherwise it's just a feed. And then he can just instantly go to another half of the map and join a fight instead. So, that's a good point that you mentioned. I mean, not in terms of just farm on the heroes, but what they're doing to make space or to flesh out the enemy's movements. Because yeah, if they 5-man and you counter that effectively with split pushing, then it either breaks up their 5-man or it reveals where they are. And that's all more information for you to act on. So that's an excellent point. It's kind of out of your hands, but it's something for players to learn if they're playing in a game like this where the other team's 5-manning and you don't necessarily want to fight them.
So here's another smoke gank. I think one of the players also did a previous smoke gank that was unsuccessful, but we don't have like vision. I don't think we have a really good idea where the enemy is. I think we saw them briefly in our jungle, but to me, like, this is like a pretty pointless smoke.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When you don't have vision on them and you're so dependent on the Magnus, I feel like you need to have some kind of vision, because otherwise someone else has to go in first and bait to set up the RP. He has a gem, and it looks like this fight here... I'm not sure. I don't think this fight is gonna go your guys' way.
Holy shit, killing spree dominating.
And they just have a ton of damage. You've been silenced by the Skywrath. You're not able to get to your allies in time, which is to be expected. I see you've decided to cut your losses by TPing. It's a good move from you, and yeah, I think that was just not a good smoke gank. You have decent gankers because your Slark and your Legion Commander can immobilize people, but without vision it's hard to do, and the gem I probably would just use to clear some of their more aggressive wards and then just put that back on the courier and make them invest more in doing so. I think this is a case of just your team not really being sure what its ideal position is. And also, when you do something like that, it's so high risk that you're playing against an Aghanim's Tiny, so if you like make a mistake and you lose a fight, we're gonna see what's happening now, which is you're just instantly gonna lose Raxes because you don't have tier 2s to cushion the blow of losing a fight like that against an Aghanim's Tiny.
Radiant's middle barracks have fallen. Radiant's middle barracks have fallen.
Alright, so it looks like this game is winding down. They're kind of... I don't know if they'll get 2 X's out of this, but you've done, I think, a good service to how Jakiro works and the decisions that you can make in this game. Lee, I want to thank you again. You've been a great guest, and I'd love to do more of these with you in the future. So thank you for helping me out on this episode of Game Clinic Jakiro.
Yep, thank you.
Do you have any final thoughts or anything to add before we go?
Support's fun to play, so keep playing it.
Alright, there you go. Alright, Lee, thanks a lot, and everyone, have a good night, and we'll be making more episodes. Hopefully we'll have Lee back, so thank you for tuning in to Game Clinic, and stay tuned for more.